Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're taking on a term that you've probably heard 1,000 times, a label that seems so simple, so self-explanatory: Chinese music. It's a category you'll find on streaming services, in documentary titles, and in concert programs. But what if I told you that this simple, two-word phrase is one of the most loaded, complex, and maybe even misleading terms in the entire world of art? What if this label, which seems to promise a window into a culture, actually obscures it, flattening thousands of years of wildly diverse, often contradictory traditions into a single, digestible package? Today, we're going to pull that package apart. We're going to deconstruct it, piece by piece. Our guide for this journey is a fascinating collection of essays that argues, provocatively, that Chinese music as a unified concept doesn't really exist. By the end of this explainer, you will never, ever hear that phrase the same way again. So let's get started. So let's just start with that basic question. What is Chinese music? Think about it for a second. What sound comes to your mind? Is it the gentle, meditative plucking of a zither, a sound designed for quiet contemplation in a scholar's private study? Or is it the crashing cymbals and piercing vocals of a regional opera, a public spectacle designed to be heard over a noisy crowd? Maybe you think of a huge modern orchestra with rows of musicians playing traditional-looking instruments, all under the strict direction of a conductor, sounding a bit like a Hollywood film score. The problem and the central mystery of our explainer today is that all of these things, and 1,000 others, get shoved under that one umbrella. But the source material for today's explainer makes a powerful case that these traditions don't just sound different, they operate on fundamentally incompatible philosophies. Their histories are separate, their aesthetic goals are opposite, and their social functions are worlds apart. So how in the world did they all get forced into the same family? How did they get lumped together under this one single national label? That is a story we are going to unravel.
And here's the roadmap for our journey. First, we're going to tackle that big, provocative thesis head-on, the idea that, in a sense, there's no Chinese music. Then we'll have to become historians, deconstructing the official narratives of musical history that have been passed down. From there, we'll zoom in on 3 very specific, very different case studies to see just how deep these distinctions go. We'll enter the quiet, philosophical inner world of the intellectual elite. We'll step into the bright lights and high drama of the theatrical stage. And we'll sit down in a tea house to understand the unique conversational art of the ensemble. Finally, after taking it all apart, we'll try to put it back together, not with a new label, but with a whole new way of listening. So, let's begin.
Okay, section 1, there's no Chinese music. Now, that sounds like a crazy thing to say, I know, but let's unpack what's really being argued here. It's a powerful idea that unlocks everything else we're going to talk about today.
To really get this, we first need to look at a term you're probably more familiar with: world music. Think about the world music section in an old record store or on a streaming app. What's in it? Well, you might find Indian sitar music, West African drumming, Bulgarian choir singing, and Argentinian tango. What do those traditions have in common musically? Absolutely nothing. As the scholar Timothy Brennan argues, world music isn't a genre. It's a marketing category. It's a miscellaneous bin defined by what it isn't. It's not Western pop, not Western classical, not jazz. It's the music of, well, everyone else. Now, here's the crucial step. Our source material argues that the term Chinese music works in the exact same way. It's a catch-all for the other, but with a powerful political twist. So let's compare the baggage these two terms carry. World music is a commercial category, a catch-all for everything non-Western. Chinese music, the argument goes, is a nationalistic construct. It takes the borders of a modern nation-state, the People's Republic of China, and projects that political boundary backward in time onto centuries of music. It takes all the diverse, unrelated, and often aesthetically opposed musical traditions that happen to exist within those modern lines and rebrands them as a single, unified entity. It creates a false sense of a shared musical heritage where one never really existed. It's a powerful tool for building a national identity, but as a musical description, it's incredibly imprecise. It's a political idea, not a musical.
So how and why did this happen? A huge piece of the puzzle is an idea that came out of 19th century Europe: social Darwinism. This was the profoundly flawed and dangerous belief that Charles Darwin's theories of natural selection could be applied to human societies. It led to this idea that cultures exist on a ladder of development, from primitive and backward at the bottom to advanced and civilized at the top. And, of course, 19th century Western industrial nations placed themselves at the very pinnacle of that ladder. This wasn't just about technology or military might, it was about everything: government, philosophy, and yes, art. When this ideology spread to China in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it created a deep, painful anxiety among intellectuals who began to look at their own traditions through this hierarchical Western lens.
And you can feel that anxiety just radiating from this quote from a 1903 article on reforming music. Let's break it down. Traditional Chinese music has failed at what? It's failed to express the national spirit. Suddenly, music has a new job. It's supposed to be an engine for the nation. And look at the proposed solution. Western music can forge a unified will. The Western Symphony Orchestra in particular became this powerful metaphor for a modern nation-state. You have a conductor, the strong leader. You have different sections, strings, brass, woodwinds, all distinct, but all playing in perfect harmony from the same sheet music. This became the ideal. This quote marks a critical turning point where traditional music began to be seen as something lacking, something that needed to be reformed and developed to catch up with the West and serve a modern political project, rather than being appreciated for what it actually was.
All right, Section 2. To understand the problem with lumping everything together, we have to first deconstruct the simplified histories we've been told. And that means moving beyond one of the oldest and most powerful dichotomies in Chinese thought: the split between elegant music and vulgar music.
For centuries, the educated elite divided the world of sound into these two camps. On one side, you have yaye, or elegant music. This was the official music of the imperial court. It was ritualistic, incredibly slow, and bound by strict rules. Its purpose wasn't entertainment. It was a tool of governance meant to reflect cosmic harmony and uphold the Confucian ideals of correctness and social order. On the other side was, well, everything else. That was suyue, or vulgar music. This was the music of the people, of the streets, of the tea houses. It was popular, it was for entertainment, and it was full of emotion. And for that reason, the Confucian elites often saw it as dangerous. They described it using the character yin, which means not just excessive, but licentious and morally corrupting. They believed it could stir up passions and disrupt the carefully balanced social order. But the key thing to understand is this. This binary wasn't a neutral description of musical styles. It was an ideological weapon, a way for the ruling class to legitimize its own culture and control the narrative.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because history shows us just how arbitrary these labels are. Look at this timeline. During the Tang Dynasty, a period of incredible cosmopolitanism, popular entertainment music, what the court would have called suyue, or vulgar music, traveled across the sea to Japan. There, it was adopted by the Japanese imperial court, slowed down, codified, and transformed into gagaku. And the character for ga in gagaku is the exact same character as ya in yayue. So vulgar music became elegant music. Centuries later, the elegant ritual music of the Song Dynasty court traveled to Korea, where it became the foundation for aak, the royal shrine music. This diaspora of sound proves that elegant and vulgar are not fixed qualities of the music itself. They're just labels, context-dependent and constantly shifting. And it also shows that the history of this music is not a tidy, linear story that happened inside one country. It's a messy, fascinating history of travel, exchange, and transformation. Okay, so now let's zoom in. For our first case study, we're leaving the grand sweep of history and entering a very specific, very private space, the inner world of the Chinese scholar official, the literati. And we're going to do it by exploring their most cherished instrument, the guaqin. This isn't just a musical instrument, it's a philosophical worldview you can hold in your lap. To understand the guqin, you have to understand a concept that is completely alien to our modern, performance-obsessed culture, the amateur aesthetic. Now, amateur here doesn't mean untalented or unskilled. It means you don't do it for money or for fame. For the literati, playing music professionally was seen as low class, something a traveling entertainer did. For them, music, like calligraphy or landscape painting, was a private spiritual practice. It was a path to self-cultivation. The goal wasn't to dazzle an audience with technical fireworks. That was considered crass. The goal was an inward journey of introspection, subtlety, and personal expression. The music was a form of meditation, a diary of the soul, meant to be played for oneself, or perhaps for one or two close friends who could truly understand the deep, quiet language being spoken.
This entire philosophy is built right into the sound of the instrument itself, which is said to have 3 distinct voices. First, you have sen, which means scattered or open. This is the sound of the open, unfretted strings. They produce a deep, woody, resonant tone that is said to represent the voice of the earth. Then you have fan, the harmonics. By lightly touching the string at specific nodes, the player produces these incredibly pure, ethereal, bell-like tones that seem to float in the air. This is the voice of heaven. And finally, you have an, the stopped strings. This is where the player presses the string firmly against the wood, creating the melody. This voice is full of nuance, slides, pulls, and vibratos, and it represents the complex, emotional inner world of humanity. A single piece of Guathan music is a cosmic dialogue, a weaving together of heaven, earth, and humanity.
So if you're creating music that's this personal, this philosophical, how do you even write it down? Well, this leads us to one of the most beautiful paradoxes in all of music. The Guqin uses a musical score that doesn't actually record notes.
What you're looking at is a single character from this notation system, called Zhenzipu. It looks complicated, but it's actually an ingenious set of instructions. It's not a symbol for a pitch like a C# or an F. It's a kind of choreographic map for the player's hands. Let's break this one down. This top left radical originally meant name, but here it's an abbreviation telling the player to use their ring finger. The cross below it means 10, instructing them to find the 10th hui, or mother-of-pearl marker, on the instrument's body. The character on the bottom right tells them to pluck the 7th string, and the hook on the bottom left is a shorthand for qiao, an instruction to pluck the string with an outward motion. So this single character tells you which finger, which string, which position, and which plucking technique to use. It's incredibly precise. But what's missing? Everything. There is no rhythm. No tempo, no indication of dynamics or emotional tone. All of that, the very soul of the music, is left entirely to the player's interpretation in that moment. The score is just a starting point for meditation, not a definitive blueprint for sound.
All right, let's leave the quiet scholar studio and step out into the blazing lights of the stage. For our second case study, we're diving into the world of Chinese opera, a world of high drama, spectacle, and sound. And we're going to see that even within this single category, we find completely opposite philosophies at play by comparing 2 major forms, the elite literary kunchu and the popular dynamic Cantonese opera. These 2 forms represent a perfect illustration of the ya versus su, elegant versus popular divide. Kunku is the quintessential elegant opera. It was patronized by the educated elite, and its primary goal is to be a vessel for high literature. It is incredibly rule-bound. A playwright writing a new kunku opera doesn't create new melodies. They must meticulously fit their poetic lyrics into a vast catalog of pre-existing melodic structures called kupai. The music preserves the literature. Now flip over to Cantonese opera. It is through and through a popular, commercial, market-driven art form. It does the exact opposite of kunku. Its principle is easy sing chang. Follow the words to shape the tune. The composer creates new fluid melodies designed specifically to fit the tonal contours and dramatic punch of the Cantonese lyrics. It constantly evolves to keep its audience hooked. One is a museum for literature, the other is a living, breathing, adaptive creature of the stage.
And just to show you that these labels are never simple, even within the highly rule-bound, elegant world of kunku, there's incredible complexity. A single kunku opera is actually a fusion of 2 distinct musical styles, a southern style and a northern style. The southern style, or nanchu, has winding, gentle melodies, described as few words, slow tune. It uses a 5-note pentatonic scale, and the emphasis is on the sheer beauty of the vocal sound. The northern style, or beichu, is the opposite. Its melodies are direct and vigorous, many words, fast tune. It uses a 7-note heptatonic scale, and the emphasis is on the clear delivery of the words. A master kunku performer has to be completely fluent in both of these demanding styles, shifting between them seamlessly. This just goes to show the deep layers of complexity that get erased when we just use a simple label like Chinese opera. Now, in stark contrast to Kunko's preservationist impulse, the story of Cantonese opera is a story of relentless change and adaptation. In the early 20th century, it was actually performed in a formal Mandarin-based dialect. But in the 1920s, performers made a radical, market-savvy switch to vernacular Cantonese to better connect with their local audiences. Then, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, as jazz and Hollywood movies became popular in cities like Hong Kong and Guangzhou, what did Cantonese opera do? It absorbed them. Suddenly, you had saxophones and violins playing alongside traditional instruments. After 1949, the art form split. In mainland China, it became state-managed and reformed to fit new political ideologies. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, it continued on its market-driven path, evolving with popular tastes. Cantonese opera is like a cultural sponge, always soaking up what's new and exciting in the world around it.
All right, for our third and final case study, we move to yet another distinct musical world. This is the music of the small ensemble, known as siju, which literally means silk and bamboo, referring to the silk strings of instruments like lutes and fiddles and the bamboo bodies of flutes. This music, often played in intimate settings like tea houses, operates on a logic that is completely different from the private meditation of the guqin or the public spectacle of opera. And it's especially different from a Western orchestra. It's not about perfect hierarchical unity. It's about the art of conversation.
The core aesthetic principle of this music is a beautiful concept called jiahua, which means adding flowers. Here's how it works. The musicians all start with a simple, shared skeletal melody, known as the mother tune. Then, as they play it over and over, each musician begins to add flowers. That is, they add their own personal embellishments, ornaments, and variations to that core tune based on the unique character of their own instrument and their own musical personality. The flute player might add a trill, the pipa player a percussive roll, the fiddle player a little slide. The result is incredible. It's not unison, where everyone plays the exact same thing, and it's not Western harmony with chords supporting a melody. It's a texture called heterophony, where you hear simultaneous variations of the same tune. It's like a lively, respectful conversation where everyone is talking about the same subject but with their own unique voice. It's a kind of musical democracy in action. Okay, section 6. We've been on quite a journey. We started with a single problematic label. We deconstructed official histories. We've explored 3 completely different musical universes: the private, meditative world of the guqin, the public, dramatic world of opera, and the social, conversational world of the ensemble. Now it's time to synthesize what we've learned and return to our original problem, but this time equipped with a new way to hear these sounds. The source material argues that forcing all these traditions under the single banner of Chinese music has created a very real modern aesthetic crisis. For one, practitioners of these different genres often don't understand or even respect each other. A modern conservatory-trained musician who values technical precision might listen to an old guqin master and hear only bad technique, completely missing the philosophical depth. Second, the political push for standardized, reformed national music has often steamrolled regional specificities, erasing the very nuances that made these traditions so rich. Third, that ghost of social Darwinism still haunts the culture, creating a false hierarchy where a Western-style orchestra is seen as more developed than a local tea house ensemble. And finally, it creates a pointless obsession with origins and authenticity, arguing about who invented what first, which completely misses the point that music is a living, breathing cultural practice, not a race to a finish line. So what's the solution? Where does this leave us? The editor of the book this explainer is based on poses this powerful final question. He asks if there's a third way, a path beyond the simple binary of either loving or rejecting the nationalist project of China. Is there another possibility? He suggests that maybe we can try to listen from the edges. Instead of listening from the grand, centralized perspective of national identity, what if we try to find an angle of listening, a tinzhou, that transcends nationalism altogether? This means the goal isn't to come up with a better, more accurate definition for Chinese music. The goal is to adopt a better, more open, more curious, and more human way of listening to music, period. And so we end with this, a simple 2-word imperative. Because the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive isn't a new fact or a different category to place on a shelf. It's an action. It's an invitation. It's a challenge to all of us. To listen past the convenient labels, to listen beyond the borders of politics and nationalism, and to try to hear the vast, complex, and deeply human conversations that have been happening for centuries. To hear the quiet meditation, the boisterous drama, the friendly chat. To listen differently. Not just to the sounds we've explored today, but to all the music you encounter from every corner of the world. Thank you for joining me on The Explainer.